The question on the mind of seemingly every student from the University of Winnipeg is about the Mandatory Aboriginal course. Whether you're walking the halls, roaming the overpriced cafeteria, or surfing online, the question comes up. The only sure thing about the matter is, everyone has their own opinion.
The Mandatory Aboriginal Studies class at the UW, I am extremely supportive of.
It's one step of many to carry us into a more progressive future.
I think it'd be a really good idea.
It shouldn't really be mandatory.
I'm in support of the Indigenous courses.
I think a mandatory Indigenous course is definitely necessary and needed.
I don't think it's fair.
I think they should.
I'm all for the Indigenous class being a required class at the University of Winnipeg.
Being an Aboriginal person, I really feel that it's not necessary for people to take it.
Before we get carried away, let's start with the basics.
So the Indigenous requirement was first conceived in the mid-2000s. It was spoken about as part of our strategic planning documents, but it wasn't really until about 18 months ago that it came up as a serious idea that we should consider. And at that point in time, the Student Association, in partnership with the Aboriginal Students' Council, began to do departmental consultations, student consultations, and perhaps most importantly, in our minds, consultations with the Indigenous community of academics we have here at the university and the broader Indigenous community. It is a privilege to have an academy that offers so many courses. At this point, we've assembled approximately 130 courses from 21 different departments that would satisfy the requirement. I think we're looking to spark something in students. Just like an undergraduate education is supposed to spurn you on your path of learning, it does not provide all the answers. It does not teach you how to think, but instead it provides you the opportunity to choose what to think about. We want to give students the opportunity to think about the Indigenous experience here in Canada, not only if you're Indigenous, but even if you are a white Canadian or a newcomer Canadian. Anybody who graduates from this institution in the 21st century should have some basic understanding.
It should be no surprise that a course like this will be mandatory in the province of Manitoba. Studies show 16.7% of Manitoba's population identifies as Aboriginal. That's 4 times the amount of the national average, which is sitting at 4.3%. Having this mandatory Indigenous course in place wouldn't just be a look into another culture, but a glimpse into Canada's history.
First Nations people are very relevant to this country in the fact that this is our country. We were the first people that were settled here, right? And you know, they're always coming out with different anthropological studies. A lot of them have traced our roots, you know, in North America to over 10,000 years ago.
I think there's a history of colonization in Canada that needs to be addressed, and the injustices to Aboriginal people is definitely ignored, and I think having that class will just create an awareness with the university campus.
I actually took a Native Studies course in high school as an option, and I really benefited from it more than I thought I would. And I just feel like I'm a more empathetic person because of it, and I think that people probably underestimate the benefits of a course like that.
It'll help really bridge a gap. I mean, if you look at things like statistics, right, 60% of the people incarcerated in Canada are First Nations. It has to do with intergenerational problems, right? It all stems back from residential school. You take away a culture's identity, you force them to not practice their beliefs, things that normally would have given their kids, you know, guidance and structure. You take that away from them and it destabilizes the whole system. They come out of residential school, they don't know how to be parents. So, you know, they end up having children, right? The first thing they turn to, alcohol, drinking, anything they can do to cope. The kids see that, they grow up with abuse. They don't go to school either. Hence, you got the next generation, right? It carries over.
So what about the people who are against the course? What are their reasons?
If you're interested, take the course, but if you're not, then you should be able to have like a free saying of if I do or don't want to take the course.
I feel like if anyone wants to really learn about our culture, there's a lot of different ways of doing so, and that making a mandatory course, people are going to have to pay for that. It's not really quite fair for other people who don't need to really take the course.
I think students shouldn't have to pay for a course that they don't want to take. And I think if they're teaching an Aboriginal Studies course, they should teach other courses about situations like the Kamagara Maru, like the Japanese Railroad or Chinese Railroad.
You know, I have been on the receiving end of really hateful phone calls, really hateful emails, and the vast majority of the comments that I hear fly against the face of basic understandings of humanity that I've heard. the vast majority of the arguments against this that are coming from the broader community do stem from a place of simple racism and simple ignorance. There are things we should be considerate of. There are legitimate academic questions coming from members of the academy, and I think we're going to have time to talk about those in depth, and we're going to have time to work that stuff out, and we should. And it would be a failure on our part if we didn't consider all the perspectives at the table.
Whatever your opinion may be on this subject, remember this.
Information combats ignorance. I think a lot of the stereotypes, a lot of the bigotry that we experience in society, whether it's directed at Indigenous peoples or otherwise, is a product of ignorance. We can only dispel ignorance through knowledge, and that's one of the primary operations of a university within our society, is to give people access to information and let them choose it and let them seek it out, but also let us define what it takes to be a graduate of the University of Winnipeg in the 21st century. What must we incorporate into our common curriculum? It's our opinion that if you want to graduate from this institution, you should have some understanding of the scientific method. You should have some understanding of how to read and write and articulate an argument. And also, you should have some understanding of the Indigenous experience here in Canada.